Now time for my losers of the week. I'm going to start with the big name, Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. They've gone from NFC West winning locks to they're not even guaranteed to make the playoffs anymore. I still think they will, and I'll talk about that in the next section. But at this point, they've lost 3 of their last 4 matches. I said it last week, the Bears were my number 7, but I said if the Vikings beat them this week, it's probably going to swap, and I do have them swapping. I've now got the Vikings in 7th, and they are tied. They're making it over the Rams based on strength of victory, who are going to finish in 8th, according to my current predictions. So if you can...
It's a miracle! Oh, yeah! What about that one? Unbelievable! Balotelli, Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle. Oh, the ball is close! He's given him! He's given him! Peter Siddle's got a hat-trick on his birthday!
Welcome back to the On The Ball podcast. This is episode 86 of the show. Pleasure to have you here once again. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Thanks for rejoining us for our weekly NFL chat. If you're a fan of the channel, you've probably realised there's a bit of a pattern going on now. So we do a weekly NFL review episode where we chat about the weekend's games gone by, and then we do a fantasy episode the following day. So today it is the real life day. So we will be talking about week 10 of the NFL. I am without Pilch today. My loyal guest, life took priority today, which is fair enough. I appreciate what he does for the podcast always, but he will be back tomorrow for the fantasy episode. But today it will just be me chatting about the NFL, and I'll be going through the same segments as we did last week, and we'll see how it goes. It might be a little bit shorter because it's just me chatting, but we'll see. Alright, let's get started. Match of the week. I'm going to start, it's probably the obvious one. I think there was a little bit of a smoky in Detroit. Washington almost put off comeback of the year, but it's got to go to the Bills versus Cardinals, the Hail Mary game. The Cardinals won 32-30 at home. 30 seconds to go. The Bills were down, and Josh Allen threw a bit of an off throw to Stephon Diggs. It resulted in a touchdown, but it was more the catch that made it a touchdown than the throw. 30 seconds to go, you thought that was it. You thought that was game over. You thought the Cardinals might have a couple cracks at it, and the Bills will walk off winners, go back home with their 8-win record. But then Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins decided to have other plans, really. 2 seconds to go, Kyler Murray scrambles out of the pocket, laces out from about 50, a perfect Hail Mary, just 2 yards into the end zone. Hopkins goes up. Yes, he's got the best hands in the NFL at the moment, but he had 3 blokes on him, and you're just like, yeah, no chances of getting batted down. And then he just comes out with it. And yeah, just incredible catch. The throw was also pretty good, but I'm more impressed by the catch personally. I know a lot of people are saying it was the throw that made it, but for me, that was just incredible. But in terms of the game in general, Josh Allen and Kyler Murray both had over 300 yards from scrimmage, not from scrimmage, passing and rushing yards combined. The tale of the day, though, was the Bills just struggling to stop the run. Arizona just ran it down their throats with Chase Edmonds, Kenyon Drake, and obviously Kyler Murray. They all had over 50 yards. Kenyon Drake cracked the 100. But yeah, in the air, Hopkins had a field day. I think he had 127 yards in the air. But then on the other side, to be fair, the Bigs, not the Bigs, I just looked at Beasley and Diggs. The Bills receivers had a pretty good day as well. Beasley had over 100 yards. Diggs had 90 odd. And John Brown, first time he's had a good game in a while. He's been battling injury, but he had about 75. So the Bills looked good in the air, but ultimately it was just the Cardinals who were too good. But yeah, it was a cracking game, and that moves us into our winners and losers of the week. And the Cardinals are my first winner, as well as Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is now, his MVP chances are looking actually kind of tasty at the moment. Patrick Mahomes is still probably the favourite. I haven't looked at the betting markets or anything, but after Wilson's week, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, I think his favouritism has dwindled a lot in the last fortnight. And now Kyler, probably next to Mahomes, they're the two favourites. In my opinion, I still think Aaron Rodgers is being overlooked pretty harshly. But I think that's due to the fact that they haven't played too many blockbuster games where people have taken notice, where the Cardinals seem to be playing a good team week in, week out. But yeah, his MVP chances took a huge boost. Mahomes was on the bye, so that he didn't overshadow him. Wilson had a shocker through 2 interceptions or 3 interceptions or whatever he threw. We'll talk about that later. But now the Cardinals are top of that NFC West division, which is absolutely stacked. The Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks are all 6-3, but the Cardinals, due to their record against those two teams, go on top. And look, I don't know if you can say this, but they're almost a lock for the playoffs. Just not necessarily based on their record, but just how well they're playing. It's hard not to see them winning 2 or 3 more games for the rest of the season, which is probably what they would have to do to miss out on finals or playoffs. So yeah, I think we can almost lock them in now, not necessarily as a division winner, but as a wild card for sure. And yeah, if I was a 3rd or 4th seed in the NFC, I'd be pretty scared of coming up against the Cardinals as a wild card team. They look very dangerous on both sides of the ball. But yeah, they just keep scoring points for fun. It's so hard to stop Kyler, because if you're good in the air, then he just, rushes for 100 yards, and Edmonds and Drake are starting to form a pretty formidable partnership on the ground. So they're my first winner of the week. My second winner of the week is the New York Giants. They beat the Eagles by 10 points, their NFC East division rival. Daniel Jones had an absolute cracker of a game, had over 300 yards rushing and passing combined. And one thing that surprised me was how fast he is. I think it was that rushing touchdown he scored. There was a gap opened up. It was a pretty big gap, but he absolutely steamed through that hole. And before he knew it, he was gone. Like, there was no stopping him. I didn't realize how fast he was. I knew he was agile and stuff like that, but that was incredible. They're now 3-7, which you think isn't too great, but they're now, the Eagles are on top of that division, but they've only got 3 wins. They had a tie, which is putting them up over the Giants at the moment. But yeah, very close to taking the lead in that NFC East. Very exciting division, although it is very low quality, but it's anyone's game still. But yeah, to add to the great weekend that the Giants had by beating their Eagles rivals and bringing them in closer, the Lions beat the Washington football team, who, as I mentioned earlier, almost had a great comeback. And if Washington won, for me, they almost would have been the favourites to win that division, because I think Washington are probably the most solid team out of the 4, like the most reliable. But yeah, losing that, I think is going to be, that's a game Washington, if they wanted to win, they probably needed to beat Detroit. So yeah, now it's probably down to the Eagles versus the Giants. And I think in the last 2 rounds, all 4 of the teams play each other. So the last 2 rounds features 2 NFC East divisional matches, which is going to be pretty entertaining. In terms of the Giants, though, they've got the bye this week, and then they play the Bengals the following week, which is going to be a huge matchup. If they win that, they're going to have a pretty good chance of making the playoffs. If they lose that, I wouldn't write them off completely, but they basically, it's a must win, but at the same time, if they lose, they're probably still not out of it, but you can't really be losing to the Bengals and making the playoffs. But yeah, and then they've got a tough month after that. I think they play some of the NFC West teams or something like that. And, well, I know they definitely play the Cardinals, and so do the Eagles, so I think they are all playing the NFC West. So a tough month after that, but if they can get a win against the Bengals there, then they're on 4 wins. It's probably likely you're only going to need 6 or maybe 7 wins to win this division. So if they get up to 4 wins there, upset a big team in the following month, and then they win their last 2 divisional games in the last 2 weeks of the comp, well, then they're a good chance of making it. In terms of the Eagles, they have the Browns this week, which is a huge match for both teams, actually, because the Browns are in wild card contention as well. And similar to the Giants, after this week for the Eagles, they have a very tough month as well. I think they've got the Seahawks, the Cardinals, maybe the Packers as well, I think. But yeah, very exciting division it's turning out to be. And the Giants, Pilch did predict they would win the division last week, and I think he's not too far off there. I'll talk about who I've got winning that division in a little bit. So yeah, second winner of the week is the Giants for me. Before I get into my third winner, I'd just like to say, if you wouldn't mind liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel, I'd greatly appreciate it. or if you're listening, to get around us on the platform that you are listening by reviewing it and following the podcast. It would be very much appreciated. All right, my third winner is actually not a full team, it's a half team. It is the Saints on the defensive side of the ball. They restricted to the 49ers to 13 points after holding the Bucks to 3 just a week ago. Since the start of October, they've conceded the 8th fewest yards per attempt in the air, the least yards per carry on the ground, and the 5th least points against in total. So it's been a pretty scintillating, 5 or 6 matches for the Saints D. They started very slow, and there was a lot of shootouts they were getting into at the start of the season, but now their defense is starting to step up, and it's an important time for the defense because Drew Brees is out, punctured lung, fractured ribs, could be out for as long as, 4 or 5 weeks. So they do have Jameis, who's probably one of the better backups going around in the league, or if they play Taysom Hill, we don't know what's going on yet, but their defense is probably going to have to win them games in the next month. They don't have the toughest schedule going around. I think they've got the Falcons, Broncos, Falcons, but if the Saints can keep those teams to under 20 points like they have been in the last fortnight, even with Jameis, I think they'll pretty comfortably win those matches. So yeah, brilliant stuff from the Saints defense. They've really stepped it up. They started slow, but starting to get hot at the right time. It's a shame Breeze got injured because I think the Saints were starting to grow into NFC favoritism for me personally. So it's a shame to see him go down, but it's going to be interesting to see how Jameis goes. Is he a transformed man under Sean Payton or not? They've got the Falcons this week, which should be an interesting one because obviously the Falcons, they've been pretty bad this year, but their offense has still got a lot of quality on it. So it'll be interesting to see how that matches up against the Saints' informed defense. And then it's a big test for Jameis because if there's any defense he should be carving up, it's going to be this Atlanta D. So big match there, but yeah, that's my third win of the Saints defense. My fourth and final winner of Week 10 of the NFL is the Las Vegas Raiders. Probably not getting enough recognition for this season. I think they're going severely under the radar. They're now 6-3. People are starting to take a look at them as a wild card chance, but up until this week, I don't think anyone had even mentioned them in the playoff picture, despite their impressive results. They're 6-3, and their 3 losses have been to the Patriots in Week 3, so before they went bad, basically. They lost to the Bills, and they lost to the Buccaneers, and they've beaten teams like the Saints, so I think the Raiders are definitely not getting enough recognition for what they're doing. They're just very talented. They're actually pretty good on the defensive side of the ball as well, probably better than what you would expect, but more on the offensive side, they're absolutely killing it. They pumped the Broncos 37-12. That's why they're making this list. A comprehensive win over a division rival, but for the season, they're 8th. They have the 8th most total points, 7th most rushing yards, 2nd highest scoring percentage per drive. So each drive, they have the 2nd highest percentage out of any team in terms of chance of scoring. I know that was a bad explanation, but basically it just means they're a highly efficient offense. I think they average like the 3rd longest drives. So Carr, although he's not going downfield too often, he's just marching the boys up. Jacobs and Devontae Booker getting it going on the ground. And at the moment, they're looking like a pretty hard team to stop on the offensive side. It looks like you're going to have to put up 30 plus to beat them. They've got a big game against the Chiefs this week. It's obviously going to be tough for them, the Chiefs coming off the bye, but they did beat them last time. But after this, after that match, they've got the Falcons, then the Jets, then the Colts, then the Chargers, then the Dolphins, then the Broncos. So they're 6-3. You'd imagine 8-8 will get you to the playoffs. Maybe 9-7 to be sure. So that means they've only got to win 3 of those matches, and there's at least 4 or 5 winnable games in there. So I think very rosy times at the moment for Las Vegas, and I'll talk about them in my predicted playoff bracket in a little bit. Now time for my losers of the week. I'm going to start with the big name, Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. They've gone from NFC West winning locks to they're not even guaranteed to make the playoffs anymore. I still think they will, and I'll talk about that in the next section. But at this point, they've lost 3 of their last 4 matches. They've lost to the Cardinals, the Bills, and the Rams, who are all 3 good teams, but they're now 3rd in the NFC West. and they have negative head-to-head records against their rivals in their division. So it looks like they're still probably. Oh, I don't know if they are the best team in that division anymore, but I think they're still going to win it personally. But they're definitely a lot more flawed than we thought. Their offense, as soon as it doesn't put up 35 points, they lose basically. Russell Wilson, his MVP hopes in the last month have been nuked pretty strongly. For me, he's not really in the conversation anymore unless he turns it on in the last 6 weeks. But he's now thrown 7 interceptions in 4 matches. He's been sacked 11 times in 2 weeks. So getting sacked is a hard stat because there's so many different variables. Your receivers might not be getting open. You might be holding onto the ball too long, or your O-line might suck. And it's probably a combination of all 3 of those. So that's worrying for the O-line. For the offense, sorry. And he's been forced to rush it a lot more, which is probably another suggestion that the receivers aren't getting open or the O-line's not holding the pocket long enough. I think he's been rushing it like 7 to 8 times a game in the last couple matches. Huge game against the Cardinals this week on Thursday Night Football. Usually Thursday Night Football is pretty irrelevant, but this is a big one. They've got an easy month after this. As I mentioned before, they play the AFC East, I think. Was I saying that? Or the NFC East, sorry. But they have a lot of easy games coming up in the next month, or even the next 6 weeks, really, except for the divisional games at the end. So if they can win this game, they're right back on track. They're probably going to be a number 1, number 2, number 3 seed in the NFC. But if they lose this one, all of a sudden they will be a win behind the Cardinals, and they will have lost 4 out of their last 5. So huge game for the Seahawks. I'll talk about my predictions at the end, but I reckon they're a good chance of bouncing back here because I can't see Wilson having too many shockers in a row because he's a high-quality quarterback. My next losers are the Baltimore Ravens. They've probably been in the losers section a lot this season, but I've got to say, the Patriots did well this game. I don't think they're getting enough credit. I think people are just going straight to bagging out the Ravens, so well done to the Patriots, but yeah, the Ravens are now not even guaranteed to make playoffs, which is unheard of if you told me that at week 3 or something. They're now level on 6-3 with the Dolphins, the Raiders, the Browns, the Colts, and the Titans. So, yeah, definitely not even locks at this point. I'd still say they're a good chance of making it, but they don't have the easiest fixture to come. They've got the Titans this week, I believe, and they've obviously got to still play the Steelers and the Browns in their division. At the moment, they're second last in total passing yards. Last year, they were 27th, so it's probably not as bad as it sounds, but this is the clear fault in their team. It's all good if you have a great rushing quarterback and a great rushing game in terms of your running backs, but if you can't move the ball at all in the air, it's okay if it's just mediocre, if it's average in the league, and then you're combine that with your great rushing game, you've got a great offense. But at the moment, the passing game is so bad, it's making it hard for the rushing game to work as well. But the problem is the rushing game's not even that great either at the moment. It's a wet game against the Patriots. It was like monsoonal in the second half, so you'd expect there to be a lot of rushing yards against a bad run defense in the Patriots this year. They had their 3rd least rushing yards of the season, and last week they had their 2nd least. So, yeah, worrying times of the Ravens, especially on the offensive side. The defense is still playing great, but their offense is just not scoring enough points at the moment for them to win games. And they've got to turn it around fast because before they know it, they lose a couple games in the next 3 weeks, and they are genuinely behind the 8 ball of making the wildcard spots, let alone pushing for higher honours, which they would have been aiming for in the preseason. So they've got to lift. Lamar's getting a lot of flack, but I don't think he's actually been that bad. I just think their offense as a whole has just been pretty bad. My final loser of the week is the Chicago Bears. I think they've probably been similar to the Ravens, been in the losers quite a lot in the last month, but they lost a massive divisional matchup to the Vikings this week on Monday Night Football. Huge wildcard implications as well. Both teams aren't going to win the division with the Packers in great form, but yeah, whoever finishes higher out of the Bears and the Vikings has a good shot of getting that 3rd wild card in the NFC conference. Well, I just said the NF conference, but the NFC. The defense is playing so well, and it's just frustrating. I was talking to it with Pilch last night, the guys, our loyal guest, who can't make it today, but they've just got, like, their defense is in premiership window. If they had a somewhat decent offense, they would genuinely be Super Bowl contenders with how good their defense is, but their offense is so bad and so far away from being good. Like, I don't know what they're going to do moving forward. At the moment, it's just stale. Like, they're so boring to watch. They don't get any yards on the ground. They struggle to get anything going in the air. And I'm honestly just sick of watching them. They just can't score enough points to win. Their defense consistently holds teams to under 25 points, and they struggle to put up more than 15. They've lost 4 in a row, so they started at 5-1, and they're now 5-5. Foles had 106 yards in the air with an interception. He did look hurt, and he did get stretched off in the last quarter. They're going into the bye this week, and Trubisky was injured going into the last game. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the other side of the bye. It wouldn't really shock me if Trubisky plays if Foles is still a bit injured, but who knows what's going on with Trubisky's injury either. But yeah, for the team with such a bad air game, their rushing game is equally bad. They have had under 100 rushing yards as a team for the 7th consecutive game on Monday Night Football. And yeah, they just don't get much going. Their O-line's apparently being destroyed by injury, but it's just not playing well at all. And they've got the Packers after their bye, which is going to be tough. Then after that, they've got a nice schedule home, but they're going to have to lift their form, really. They're not going to beat many teams scoring 13 points like they did against the Vikings, who aren't even an exceptional defense this year. So they've definitely got a lift. I would not put a line through them yet in terms of playoff contention, but they've got a lift. They're likely going to be sitting at 5-6 after the Packers game, and they're probably going to have to win 3 or 4 of their last 5, but with that defense, anything's possible, but they've got some serious thinking to do over the bye about that offense and how it's been operating. That's it for the winners and losers. Now on to my predicted playoff bracket. This was a new segment last week, so each week we're going to update our predicted playoff brackets, and we're going to talk about the changes and why we've made those changes. First of all, in the NFC, mine's looking pretty similar, actually. I've still got the Packers at the number 1 seed. Still got the Seahawks as the number 3 seed, despite looking shaky at the moment. Similarly, I've still got the Eagles in the number 4 seed. I still think they're slightly better than the Giants. One change I have made, which is strange after the week that's just happened with Drew Brees getting injured, but this week I used a playoff predictor, so I went through every game this season and predicted it. I've actually got the Saints winning the NFC now, not the Bucks, the NFC South, sorry, and I've got the Bucks now the 5th seed instead of the Saints, so that just a swap there. Still got the Cardinals in the 6th seed, and I said it last week, the Bears were my number 7, but I said if the Vikings beat them this week, it's probably going to swap, and I do have them swapping. I've now got the Vikings in 7th, and they are tied. They're making it over the Rams based on strength of victory, who are going to finish in 8th according to my current predictions. So a few changes there. The Vikings, look, it wasn't a pretty win against the Bears, but it was a big win for them. I think they're going to make the playoffs now, but I think everyone, including myself, are probably underrating the Rams a little bit. They've had a tough fixture, and they've done pretty well. They're on the same record as the Cardinals and the Seahawks, and they've had a few big wins, and no one really seems to take notice just because they don't really light it up like the Cardinals or the Seahawks do, but they've been good, so you probably should respect them a little bit more in terms of the playoff conversation, but I just think the Vikings and the Bears have an easier fixture, so I still think one of them's going to make it, and for me it's the Vikings this week. But yeah, in terms of the Saints, it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with post-Drew Brees life for the next 3 or 4 weeks. I don't actually think it's going to dent them too much with how good that defense is playing at the moment, and we saw last week, last year, the Saints went undefeated when Teddy Bridgewater stepped in for Brees, so I don't think there's going to be too much disconnection there with Winston coming in or Taysom Hill or whatever they do. I think their fixture's very kind to them in this time of injury. So yeah, I've got the Saints pipping the Bucks now, but yeah, I still like the Seahawks and Eagles, but another loss this week or in the coming 2 weeks, then things might start to change there for me, but that's what I've got happening in the NFC. Now, in terms of the AFC, I've got the Steelers on top now. I had the Chiefs on top last week, but I've now got the Steelers on top. Don't really know why I had the Chiefs on top last week. I just think the Steelers, they've got a fairly easy run home. I don't really see them losing to anyone. If only, like, maximum, they're going to lose one game, I reckon, from here on in. Like, I don't think they're that good, to be honest. I can't really see a world where the Steelers win the playoffs, the Super Bowl at the moment. But they did look pretty good on the weekend against the poor Bills team. So that means I've got the Chiefs, the second seed. Interestingly enough, this is another thing like the Saints and the Bucks. You wouldn't expect it, but I've done a ladder predictor this week instead of just going off the top of my head. I've actually now got the Bills winning the AFC East instead of the Dolphins like I did last week. So the Bills are my number 3 seed. They did lose to the Cardinals, but I think that's a pretty good result, losing to the Cardinals to a Hail Mary at the very end. The Dolphins, they did win against the Chargers, but their defense is kind of carrying them at the moment. But nothing against the Dolphins. I think they'll make the playoffs. Last week I had the 5th seed as the Ravens. I've still got them there, but another week, if they lose to the Titans this week, then all of a sudden I have to reconsider that one. And then in 7th spot, rather than the Colts, even though they had a big win against the Titans, I've actually got the Raiders, who comprehensively whipped the Broncos. I just think the Raiders, they've got an easier run home than the Colts. And I like the fact that they can put up, 30 plus points against anyone. Whereas the Colts kind of rely, similar to the Bears, on limiting their opposition to 20 or less points. So that's my new playoff prediction bracket. Let me know yours in the comments down below, or if you're listening, DM me on Instagram if you disagree. That moves us into our third and final section. Well, we've got a 4th section of game predictions, but our third analysis section of Week 10, the weekly awards. So offensive players of the week. I've actually gone 3 running backs here. My number 3 was Josh Jacobs. 136 yards from scrimmage, 2 touchdowns. His second 100-plus yard rushing game in 3 weeks, so he's really starting to hit form after a few lean weeks there a month ago. Instrumental in that huge win over the Broncos that I keep talking about. Him and Devontae Booker are starting to form a pretty good partnership on the ground. And yeah, they're looking pretty dangerous, the Raiders, in both the air and on the ground. My number 2 was Ronald Jones. His stats obviously got carried by that 98-yard touchdown or whatever it was. He leapt away from the defense. You could see him looking into the big screen, and he was like lifting up his heels when he could see someone coming. It was pretty smart, actually. But he had 198 yards from scrimmage. He did have a fumble, but I overlooked that one. And he was back into the action this week. He obviously, the Bucks broke the record last week for the least amount of carries ever, or rushing attempts. And this week he had 24 touches. So big week for Ronald Jones after having less than 15 touches in his last 3 matches consecutively. Big reason why they got the win over the Panthers, but obviously Tom Brady played pretty well as well. And then my number 1, it's boring, but scoring 3 touchdowns, like he does a lot. Alvin Kamara, 2 rushing, 1 receiving. He actually got stopped on the ground. He only had 15 yards from 8 carries, but 83 yards from 7 catches, just under 100 yards from scrimmage. But as I mentioned before, the 3 touchdowns, a huge reason why they got up over the 49ers, even though Breeze did go down at halftime along with that defense. Kamara and that defense really helped them get over the line there and have them in a prime spot going into the playoffs. And once again, I'm expecting some huge stat lines coming up from Kamara in the next month. I think with Breeze and all the players coming back from injury, they were starting to expand their offense, and it was going to hurt Kamara's stat line. But I think now that they've got Winston, I think they might simplify the game plan for him. Well, I hope not, because it will be fun to see Jameis playing something sophisticated. But I reckon he might just do a lot of drop downs to Kamara or just hit slants with Thomas. So they're my top 3 offensive players of the week. Honourable mentions go to Nyheim Hines, DeAndre Swift, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and DeAndre Hopkins. They were all pretty awesome as well. But huge week for the running backs in tough conditions all over the country, it seemed. The passing games weren't as on, so the rushing games got a good workout. That's why my top 3 were all running backs. Offensive Rookie of the Week, I've gone with T. Higgins. He has had 115 yards receiving against an outstanding Steelers defense. He had one touchdown as well. He's fast growing a seriously strong bond with Joe Burrow. He loves Tyler Boyd as well, but Higgins and Boyd, they're starting to become a dynamic duo on offense. And yeah, he's really, I think he's going under the radar a little bit just because the Bengals aren't all that relevant apart from Burrow being, one of the biggest named like draftees of all time. The amount of hype he came into the league with, that's all the only reason why anyone pays any attention to the Bengals. But T. Higgins is definitely going under the radar. He's having an incredible season. Honourable mentions have got to go to Justin Jefferson, DeAndre Swift, who I mentioned before, Antonio Gibson, and Tua also played pretty decent to steer his side to a win over the Chargers. Defensive Player of the Week, I've actually given it to two people. I've gone with the Rams cornerback pairing of Darius Williams and Jalen Ramsey. Huge reason why the Rams got up over the Seahawks. They held Metcalf and Lockett to just 7 catches and 94 yards. Seems like quite a lot of yardage, but considering what these two can pump out, anything under 100 is insane. If you shut those two down, all of a sudden their receiving options don't look as spicy. Obviously David Moore's pretty decent. They've got a few tight end options, but yeah, if you shut those two down, put a little bit of pressure on Russ and that O-line, all of a sudden they don't look as invincible, and that's what the Rams did. Ramsey played in man coverage on Metcalf most of the night. Metcalf's only 2 catches came in zone coverage. Ramsey let us know that in his press conference, so Ramsey just asserted himself once again as one of the league's top cornerbacks and showed us why he got paid all that money. Darius Williams also is a bit of a lesser known player, but he had 2 interceptions, defended 3 passes as well. He also had an outstanding game. So yeah, the Rams cornerbacks pairing of Williams and Ramsey had an absolute had an absolute balling. I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. Had an absolute blast out there. Just an update on my votes rankings. So I do a 10-1 votes every week for the quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and tight end. I'm also doing it for the defensive positions, but I'm a bit behind on those ones. At the moment in the quarterback rankings, I've got Aaron Rodgers on 53 votes. Kirk Cousins is actually in second just because of his efficiency. He's on 39 votes. Patrick Mahomes is in third, 37 votes. Russell Wilson in fourth on 30 votes. Tom Brady in fifth on 28 votes. And then to round out the top 10, we've got Rivers, Tannehill, Murray, Jackson, and Watson. So some interesting names in there. Running backs, Alvin Kamara is clearly leading them on 52 votes. Dalvin Cook second on 37. Josh Jacobs is now up into third on 28 votes. Derrick Henry and James Robinson are tied fourth on 23 votes. To round out the top 10, Christian McCaffrey is in there despite only playing a handful of games. Aaron Jones, Zeke Elliott, Gurley, and Chubb round out that top 10. Wide receivers, Devontae Adams is up there on the top, along with Rodgers, the 2 Green Bay boys leading those 2 positions. He's on 35 votes. Then Justin Jefferson is in second, which is a surprising one, but he's probably going a little bit unsung like T. Higgins is. He's on 24 votes. Then Tyreek Hill's 23 votes. Lockett and Metcalf are 4th and 5th. And then to round out the top 10, we've got Hopkins, Ridley, Thielen, Jones, and Chark. And then the tight ends, there's not much going on here, but Kelsey is absolutely leading the pack by a mile, almost doubling second place. He's on 55 votes. Johnny Smith's on 30 votes. Rob Gronkowski is now up to 29 votes. Mark Andrews, 27 votes. Darren Waller, 24 votes. And then to round out my top 10, I've got Hawkinson, Cook, Kittle, Tonyan, and Graham. All right. That's probably not great podcast entertainment, just reading that off, but that's what we're going to deal with. All right, now time for our Week 11 predictions. I'm going to go through some of the matches of the week. Actually, let's just go through all of them. Why not? It's just me here today, and I've got no stat questions, so we'll roll through this. Thursday night football, Arizona in Seattle. I think Arizona are definitely the form team going into it, but I'm actually going to go the Seattle bounce back. I think their offense can't really have two bad games in a row, can it? It's that there's that much talent in the receiver and quarterback position. So I'm going to say the Seahawks win a shootout, but it's going to be interesting to see how they restrict the Cardinals' offense, because it's going to be hard seeing the Cardinals score anything less than 35 points against them at the moment. They're moving into the Sunday games. Cincinnati in Washington. Oh, I'd like to say Washington, but I'll give it to the Bengals. I think they've been underrated this year. They've had a tough draw, so I'll give them the win there. But it's going to be tough with their running defense stopping that Washington run game. Saints play host to the Falcons. I'll give it to the Saints. Steelers away at the Jags. Steelers. Patriots away to the Texans. That's actually a big game. Well, not a big game in terms of significance, but it's a close one. That's tough. That's tough. I'm going to give it to the Texans. I think their passing game will provide too many issues for the Patriots. Eagles at the Browns. I'll give it to the Browns. The Eagles need to hit form soon, otherwise the Giants will steal that playoff spot from them. But yeah, I'm giving it to the Browns at the moment to push them further into that mix for the wild cards. The Lions at the Panthers. I'll give it to the Lions just because there's a bit of an injury cloud over Teddy Bridgewater at the moment. Titans at the Ravens. That's tough because I can definitely see a world where the Titans come out and win this. The Ravens' rush defense is actually understatedly bad. But nah, I've got to go the Ravens. I can't see the Titans scoring too many points against that Ravens defense, so I'll go them. Jets at the Chargers. I'll say the Chargers finally get a win. The Dolphins at the Broncos. I think this is a danger game for the Dolphins with a good Broncos defense, but I back the Dolphins defense to limit the Broncos enough so that they get the win there. The Cowboys at the Vikings. Look, you've just got to back in the Vikings run game. I think Dalvin Cook will go huge. The Packers at the Colts. The Colts are in great form. I could see them winning this, but I'm going to be boring and backing the Packers. Even against one of the best defenses in the comp, I think the Colts will struggle to restrict the Packers to not, scoring 30 points. Chiefs at the Raiders. I'm going to go the Chiefs. Once again, boring. And then the Rams at the Buccaneers. Oh, that's tough. I could definitely see the Rams winning that, but I'm going to go the Bucs. They need to bounce back in prime time. So that's my Week 11 picks. And that's all I've got for you today. Tune in tomorrow if you've enjoyed this episode. Tune in tomorrow for our Fantasy Week 11 preview. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe because we do this every week and we do a fantasy episode every week. So I'm sure you'll enjoy the content. Like it, comment if you've got anything you want to say to me or you've got any questions or you disagree with anything I've said today. And yeah, join me tomorrow, same time, same place, with a different person. Or you can just come back for this one next week. And thanks for joining me and enjoy your weekend of NFL action.